delay, que a gente está tão perto, aí ele vai dar uma volta pelo mundo para sair aí. 1, 2. Então agora eu vou fechar esse usuário e vou abrir um outro para vocês poderem usar aqui. Não interfere em nada. Esse vai cair rodando. Onde que está a câmera? Essa aqui. Aí vocês usam no outro usuário. Nesse aqui, professor. Então aí eu consigo entrar no sistema JUSP. Isso, aí pode usar à vontade aqui que não interfere em nada. Está no outro usuário, a gente só não desliga o computador, que aí ele para de. A gente. Você tem. Bom, dá para entrar no YouTube e tudo à vontade. Tá bom? Tá? Vai ter amanhã e quarta-feira de novo? Tá bom, então. Muito obrigado. Acho que não vou. Não sei se ele tem. Eu vou pedir para ele botar no. Vai dar para a gente. Para que o pendrive? Para que o pendrive? Para a aula dele. Um minutinho pra gente. A gente costuma começar 8 horas, a gente vem pontual para essas coisas, mas é o primeiro dia, e antes do professor. Não tem que ser feitas as anotações. Eu pedi para pegar o professor por enquanto, chegar um pouquinho mais tarde, porque eu quero falar um pouco para vocês da matéria, que tem os nossos convidados, mas é importante que quem é da matéria saiba qual vai ser a dinâmica do curso. Você teve surpresa, né? Hoje é importante, muitas vezes precisa desse apoio, mas às vezes é muito difícil aí pegar um negócio e fazer uma outra. Não, posso ficar. Não, a ideia pode vir na. Não precisa não, tá? E pode ter você não apresentar os compromissos. É mais importante. É mais importante. Você faz, pega ali. Você faz com as frequências para exonerar. Deixa eu ver. Bom, mas então é isso. Precisa de outra coisa? Tá rodando. Se você quiser abrir, deixar aí, você vê. Tá. Eu vou tentar. Vou tentar acompanhar aqui. Estava tentando ver se eu conseguia entrar em outra entrada na internet. Se eu consigo entrar em outra na internet. Oi, Tamires. Peço a todos para terem um pouco de paciência, porque nós estamos esperando aumentar o quórum dos convidados e dos alunos, porque antes do professor Steinmeyer chegar, eu vou fazer alguns avisos para a turma regular, e aí eu peço só um pouquinho de paciência, tá bom? Arcanjo, você pode me ajudar? As teclas estão trocadas. Eu acho que resolvi isso aqui. Sim. O que aconteceu aqui? Deixa eu conseguir exibir. Estou tentando entrar nesse aqui no programa, mas não está dando certo. Né? Não sei como é que está aqui, né? Porque eu estou tentando abrir e aí ele não entra. Ah, não vai fazer isso comigo não, filho. Esse novo usuário sem você. Não acredito. Deixa eu ver aqui. Vou tentar de novo. Bom dia a todas e a todos. Nós estamos aguardando, nós começamos um pouco mais tarde, porque nós estávamos aguardando a audiência um pouco maior por conta do curso. E nós hoje, antes da chegada do professor Steinmeyer, vocês desculpem eu estar sentado aqui, eu gostar de movimentar, mas nós está havendo uma transmissão no YouTube, então, para não ficar estranho eu ficar pulando na frente e não ter ninguém falando, vai ficar muito esquisito, então eu vou fazer daqui excepcionalmente. Então, o professor Steinmeier vai chegar por volta de 8h30, para que eu possa explicar para os alunos regulares e mesmo os especiais qual é a dinâmica do curso, e aí depois nós iniciamos a intervenção do professor Steinmeier. Bom, quem é do curso, quem está no curso, tem um número de acesso ao Moodle da disciplina. Então, é só entrar no sistema USP, e aí tem o Moodle, e no Moodle você indica, normalmente é o número USP e uma senha que você mesmo cria ou você mesma cria. Então, lá vocês verão que nós temos um programa e alguns textos que já estão disponíveis para os alunos e para as alunas. Só que tem alguns que não estão e vocês vão ter que adquirir, porque são textos regulares da matéria. Então, por exemplo, a partir da semana que vem nós começamos a usar o texto do Pachucanes, que é o Teoria Geral do Direito e o Marxismo e Ensaios Escolhidos de 1921 a 1929. Essa é uma edição da Sanderman. Existe uma outra edição, mas nós usamos essa porque essa foi feita pelo coletivo, por nosso coletivo, para que nós possamos dar aulas na graduação e na pós-graduação. Então, a gente domina a edição e por isso é que costumamos usar a edição. As páginas estão lá indicadas no programa, e a cada semana, hoje nós temos o professor Steinmeyer, que fará a sua participação para explicar a flexibilização das leis previdenciárias e trabalhistas na Europa, em 3 encontros, será bem concentrado. E depois nós teremos um outro bloco em que nós explicaremos a forma jurídica, conceitos gerais da forma jurídica. Um outro bloco, eita, então, como nós estávamos falando, nós temos essas especificidades da disciplina, que é a utilização desse texto para o primeiro bloco.
segundo bloco, perdão. No terceiro bloco, nós utilizaremos um livro do Edelman, que é o Direito Captado pela Fotografia, que está à disposição de vocês, porque ele é difícil de ser encontrado. Então, descendo aqui, deixa eu descer por aqui, que eu acho que vai dar. Então, aqui estão os objetivos da disciplina, a justificativa da disciplina e o conteúdo. Conteúdos são exatamente esses, aliás, 5 blocos. O primeiro é da flexibilização das leis trabalhistas e previdenciárias na Europa, que são as aulas com a participação do professor Steinmeyer. Introdução à forma jurídica em Pachucanes, que é o segundo bloco, e por isso nós vamos precisar desse material. O terceiro bloco é a forma jurídica em Edelman. O quarto bloco, a reforma previdenciária e a forma jurídica. O bloco 4, a reforma trabalhista e forma jurídica. Depois nós vamos fazer uma leitura conjunta das reformas a partir da forma jurídica e conclusão do curso. Então, se vocês perceberem, nós temos em cada um desses blocos um professor convidado que irá nos ajudar. Então, no primeiro bloco, nós temos aqui esse conjunto. E o mais importante, vocês perceberem que em cada bloco, cada um desses blocos, nós iremos fazer uma... tem a quantidade dos textos, existe uma parte de exposição e uma parte de utilização dos textos, com as páginas aí indicadas. Então, é isso que vocês vão ter que saber para a próxima semana, por exemplo, do dia 28 de agosto, nós já temos aqui as páginas indicadas de leitura. E assim vai até o último encontro, o nosso último encontro. Aí depois, no outro bloco, nós vamos estudar o Edelman. Esse texto do Edelman está à disposição de vocês, porque ele não é um texto de fácil ser encontrado, então a gente deixou ele aqui porque ele foi esgotado, ele é uma edição portuguesa, então há uma dificuldade de alcançar os textos. Aí a gente passa para esse texto do Edelman, e quando a gente chega no último bloco, nós trabalhamos com o texto A Legalização da Classe Operária. Esse vocês vão ter que adquirir também, esse é mais fácil a aquisição, porque ele é da Boitempo, então ele tem uma circulação mais fácil. Então eu sugiro a vocês que se ocupem de procurar esse livro do Edelman, conversem entre vocês para acertar o livro do Pachucanes, porque ele é de mais difícil acesso. Por último, o que é importante aqui é saber que, na verdade, vocês precisarão desse texto, porque metade da avaliação será feita a partir... é uma avaliação qualitativa e quantitativa de perguntas reflexivas a respeito dos textos indicados na segunda parte das aulas, conforme o cronograma. As perguntas referentes aos textos da semana deverão ser entregues no início da respectiva aula. Então, é assim, vocês vão ler o texto, e depois que lerem o texto da semana que vem, por exemplo, é o Pachucanes, vocês terão que trazer uma pergunta que seja reflexiva a respeito do tema e deixar com a gente no início da aula. Por quê? Porque nós leremos as perguntas, né, nós teremos um intervalo, inclusive, para ler as perguntas, e nós vamos impulsionar a segunda parte da aula com as perguntas de vocês. E é a partir daí que virá metade da avaliação de vocês. Tá? Então, necessariamente, iniciando a aula, tragam essas perguntas. Então, a partir da semana que vem, isso já faz parte dos critérios de avaliação. E a outra metade é a aplicação do método ao projeto de pesquisa de mestrado ou doutorado de vocês. Bom, isso é importante. Talvez a coisa mais importante, eu vou ter que reiterar isso para vocês. Nós, enquanto coletivo, temos um método de leitura. O nosso método é um método baseado no materialismo histórico dialético, que é um método proveniente das obras de Marx. Então, uma leitura ou é um recorte marxista, metodológico. Por que isso é fundamental? Porque é óbvio que nenhum professor pretende induzi-los à escolha de um método. Qualquer professor pretende apresentar métodos de leitura para vocês. E nós estamos apresentando mais um dentre os diversos métodos de leitura possíveis do direito. No entanto, quando se apresenta esse método para uma turma, você, obviamente, conduz o curso a partir desse método. Ou seja, vocês vão ter que usar o método para a leitura dos textos que serão feitos. Daí a importância de dizer o seguinte: a despeito de ninguém ser obrigado a utilizar esse método para além dessa disciplina, nesta disciplina há necessidade de que nós tenhamos condições de verificar se houve a apreensão do método. Portanto, eu chamo muito atenção para isso, porque nós já tivemos alguns problemas no passado. Das pessoas terem uma certa resistência à utilização do método e tudo mais, e não terem sido bem-sucedidas no andar da disciplina exatamente porque não se mostraram receptivas ao entendimento do método, à utilização do método. É a única coisa que a gente quer, especificamente na disciplina, para apresentar para vocês alternativas de pesquisa. É isso que nós estamos fazendo. Portanto, assim, eu queria que vocês fossem muito criteriosos na continuidade do curso para saber que é isso que a gente quer de vocês. Então, assim, uma eventual não utilização do método, seja no trabalho final, seja nas perguntas, poderá conduzir a uma avaliação menos indicativa da possibilidade de um aluno ser, inclusive, aprovado, porque a gente precisa só saber se vocês entenderam o método. É só isso que a gente precisa. Então, aliás, esse é um critério de avaliação geral, né, de cada professor que utiliza o seu método. Um professor positivista certamente pretende dos alunos a obtenção desse tipo de recorte. O professor lumaniano pretende que alguém saiba fazer esse recorte. E assim também nós pretendemos que vocês entendam e utilizem esse recorte. Então sejam muito cuidadosos com essa observação, tá bom? Agora eu acho que a gente já pode começar. Há uma questão, nós temos, esse curso ficou concentrado em muito pouco tempo, o professor Steinmeyer está conosco por um período muito curto, então a gente vai ter... Nós teríamos um problema, não é um problema, porque eu acho que é fácil de solucionar. Como é muito concentrado, a outra vez que nós fizemos com a presença do professor Steinmeyer, nós conseguimos fazer, não existe tradução simultânea na USP, infelizmente. Então, como não existe a tradução simultânea, nós temos aí esse problema de que no último encontro o Flávio se dispunha a fazer essa tradução para a gente, mas era muito complicado, porque o curso ficava brecando, a exposição ficava brecando muito, e isso atrapalhou o curso, porque a gente poderia ter dado muito mais conteúdo do que a gente acabou dando. Então, dessa vez, nós não faremos esse tipo de interrupção. Então, o professor irá falar, eu pedi para ele falar mais pausado possível, para vocês compreenderem. Eu peço aos alunos que não... Porque eu verifiquei a ficha de todos, acho que dos alunos inscritos, a maior parte fez proficiência em inglês, mas, ao mesmo tempo, se alguém tiver um pouco de dificuldade, maior dificuldade, procure se aproximar de alguém aí que fala inglês, porque aí ele vai te ajudando para a gente poder dar fluência, porque são 3 encontros para falar, ele tem quase 150 slides, então, assim, se a gente não aproveitar essa oportunidade de poder conversar com o professor, fica complicado. Então, por isso vai ser em inglês, ele vai fazer mais pausado, nós vamos fazer uma primeira parte, aí dá uma parada, e voltamos para uma segunda parte, tá bom? Então, deixa eu colocar. Alguma dúvida em relação às questões que foram colocadas do programa? Não? Bom, deve ter gente que ainda vai chegar depois, porque tem mais inscritos no programa, mas vamos ver. No, you have to help me.
Let's take it this way around. There.
will stay here and I help you with the slides, okay?
Okay.
Você quer trocar? Você arrou aqui. Você quer, fica aqui, acho que você tem mais condições de movimentar isso. E aí eu passo para lá. Aí tem que deixar depois passar isso. Ixi.
Okay, everything works. Okay, okay.
Good morning. First of all, I will introduce Professor Steinmeyer. Professor Steinmeyer is a professor from Münster Law School. It's one of the most important law school in Germany and also in Europe. We are working together about 4 years or 5 years. It's a permanent network between our university and Münster University, and I think it's the third time you are here. Yes. And we went to Münster also about 2 turns. Yes. And I'd like to say that we appreciate a lot your presence here, and thank you very much. Okay, so the word is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here and to teach to you. You have to tell me if I talk too fast. I have lived in the United States for a years ago, and so I'm quite familiar with English, so I might speak too fast. I also would like to, because these kind of courses are something interesting, hopefully, for you, but for me it's also a thing to learn. And so, because I'm presenting to you my European German view, and I would be interested to know more about the Brazilian view. We talked a bit about it, but I think the basic thing is, personally for me, also to really learn it and to see also your views about the topic. And this is why you should simply intervene also when I'm talking. I'm a professor now for about 40 years. You see, it's not too early, not just at the beginning. So I've experience with teaching and with intervening, and no problem, okay. So this is one thing I have to say. You already mentioned my university, which is, to give some ideas where it is in Germany. If most people know about Berlin, know about Cologne, Hamburg, and these big cities. It's halfway between Hamburg and Cologne, and it's one of the biggest universities. We have 40,000 students, which is a lot in Germany. While the law school has about 5,000 to 6,000 students. In there I am still focusing on labor law and social security law, and I also do some work for the government if I was asked by the government to go to the parliament, parliamentary commissions, etc., especially on pensions, but also other topics. So, well, I'm now an emeritus, but still I'm working. And you said, well, do not work too much, enjoy life. Well, I enjoy working. That's my problem. This is something I wanted to tell you before I start the topic. Okay, my topic is flexibilization of labor and social security laws in Europe. In a way, when Makros Oyona asked me to do this, I said, well, in a way, you have to talk about everything. And so where to start and how to put things together, to give it an order, was challenging. Because when you think about flexibility, what does flexibility mean? Well, in a way, I was flexible personally to fly to a long, long way, 10 hours flight, to Sao Paulo for teaching. That's flexibility. And to adjust to the time difference between Brazil and Germany is also flexibility. And so what exactly does flexibilization mean? I found out when I looked again into the literature in Europe, in Germany, that there were a lot of different understandings in Germany as well. And also here, flexibilization is a sometimes different thing you think about. Flexibilization could be, well, you have to see it from different angles, from different points of view. As a guy doing social security and labor law, a person, let's start with the worker. The worker would say, oh, it would be flexible for me, to start working when I think I'm fit enough, or so it's weather pretty good outside, I don't work. But in the afternoon, when they announce it will rain, I do work. That's flexibility. But to be a bit more serious, flexibility also for a worker might be, well, I have children at home. So, for example, I brought up my daughter as a single father. And so I had the privilege to be a professor. And so I had the flexibility to put my courses in the morning. So I brought her to school and picked her up after my classes, because then her classes had ended. It's flexibility. Or childcare flexibility. Or to get back into a job after certain time, flexibility. So this is, in a way, from the workers, from the employees' point of view, okay? Just the wishes, in a way. Let's take it from the enterprise point of view. Well, an enterprise is thinking about, we have sometimes full book of orders. We don't know how to work it all out. One example in Europe is Airbus. Airbus is busy with the order they got, I think, for the next 10 or 15 years, without any interruption, 10 years in advance. They have to make airplanes. For them, no problem, they need workers. But an enterprise there has to be flexible? Yes. Because, for example, also take Airbus. You may have heard about the big 380, this super jumbo, which is in a way, the airlines don't like it. So they now construct other airplanes, smaller ones. So they have to move people from one place, because Airbus is placed in Europe, in Germany, in France, in Britain. Until now, we don't know what happens after Halloween, etc., all around. So they have to be flexible to maybe move people, workers, from Toulouse in France to Hamburg in Germany, because they need them in Hamburg, not in Toulouse. This is flexibility from an enterprise point of view. From an enterprise point of view, if the enterprise is not in such a great shape as it's Airbus, flexibility would mean we don't know how often we need the people. So, for example, in Europe, it's summer now. And if you ever have been to Europe, especially Bavaria or also places, there are beer gardens. You know the beer gardens, okay? And the beer garden is nothing worse if it's raining. But it's great if it's sun. You need waiters to give you the beer, bring you the beer, if it's not raining. If the weather is great, and if it's sunny, if it's warm. Otherwise, if it's bad, then we don't need them. How to manage this? These people want to get work. They have to be flexible. Flexible here means they don't get money during the time, okay? Another thing is a company has a workforce of sorry. Okay. So take this away and this one. Okay. Technology. Okay. So, another situation. A company has to adjust sometimes to different situations. So take, for example, even companies like car makers, like Volkswagen, BMW, etc. There are phases where they know we need a lot of workers because we have a lot of orders in our books, and we have situations where we don't have. So should we fire them and rehire them? Because this would be something we would do. So to have only the workforce you need, because if you have too much workforce, you are running into problems because you have to pay these people. So from an employer point of view, flexibility would mean I can rid of the people very easy and can rehire them very easy again. So there are some people saying this is a breathing factory. It's a strange phrase for it, but it's a phrase which is used. So this is the other aspect. So he might love the North American approach of hiring and firing. So this is also flexibility. And so somewhere there we have to find a pathway. And I think there are different approaches and different traditions. And what I want to do with you is to show you certain approaches by Europe, by Germany, and by this showing you how the German system of labor law and social security law works, because otherwise you cannot understand the flexibilization, and see what's otherwise going on there, including not only labor law, but it's predominantly labor law here, this area, but also social security law. To give you some ideas in social security law, what about people want to have some time off. How is the health insurance, sabbaticals? Or women, sorry for this cliche, women want to take care for their children. How could they adjust it with certain healthcare protection, etc., etc. So I start now a bit with the wording of flexibilization, flexibility, and so on. And here I found some definitions somewhere, and just put them together, and later on we try to make it a bit clearer. So, flexibilization, it's a first quotation, refers to changing work practices by which firms no longer use internal labor markets. Stop here. What is an internal labor market? What do you think? Internal labor market means that a big company can really, within the company, pick people from one place to the other. So what I talked about Airbus is internal labor market. It's very internationally because Airbus is in different countries. But nevertheless, it's one, not company, but one group of companies. And so it's an internal labor market. Okay. And so they can see, well, we have people who did work on these very big A380 jumbo. We don't need them there anymore, but because all people want to fly the smaller ones, which you always have here. So we have to put them there. That's internal labor market. And this internal labor market is a good thing for the employer and for the employees. Well, for the employees is what problem? They have to be flexible to move from Hamburg to Toulouse or vice versa. And so it might not be charming for everybody because of family. And if you're young, you enjoy to go somewhere else, but if you have family and a house, you are not so flexible anymore. So this is internal labor market. Implicitly promise employees lifetime job security. So no longer use internal labor, flexibilization one definition, or implicitly promise employees lifetime job security. So my job as a professor is a lifetime job. And I was appointed professor, and it said on the appointment document, appointed for lifetime, which is very comfortable. And so I stayed with that university. But this is maybe a thing of the past, to be realistic. Not at university, it's another situation, but generally it might be a thing of the past. And so flexibilization, this definition says, but rather seek flexible employment relations. You see the problem. Flexibilization means flexible relations. Well, it's a flexible employment relation that permit them to increase or diminish the workforce. Now they have the breathing factory again. And reassign and redeploy employees with ease. That's flexibilization. If you see this flexibilization, this aspect, well, you can make 2 points. If you see this, this might be good for the enterprise, but this may cause problems for the other side, for the employees. And so the question is how to put this together. In some countries like Austria, the debate surrounding greater flexibility of the employment is concentrated on two issues: working hours and pay. So you might be a bit possible to be flexible in pay and flexible in working hours. So we need you less, we need you more. So you have a stable employment relationship, but sometimes say, okay, we only need you half a day. And the question is, how is this paid now, this flexibility? Only 5 hours or an average or whatever. And other forms of flexibilities, this definition says, although important, are not usually the focus of collective agreements and works agreements. What does that mean? We have to see, when we talk about flexibility, at least in most European countries, and especially Germany and Austria, we have an influence, certain influence of the trade unions. It's all over Europe. And works agreements, we also have an influence of the Works Council in Germany, and there's something like it, but a bit weaker, in Austria. So they usually deal with these topics. So I will, in this course, more or less in the end, I will also include in what I want to cover the co-determination issue, because co-determination makes sometimes companies less flexible, but on the other hand, they make things possible which you otherwise should not make possible. And so, to give you an idea, my former father-in-law was a guy who had a company in heating area, and I talked with him because he knew his son-in-law was a professor in labor law, and I talked with him about his works council he had in his company. And he said, well, it's great to have this, because I need somebody to talk with. I need some people to arrange things with, make things easier. And so this makes, it sounds as if this would make the companies less flexible, because a manager without this would decide, say, well, now it's 9 o'clock, and at 10 I will send an email to the others, I've decided, that's it. If you have a works council, it may be 9 o'clock next Monday, because you need to arrange certain things. You have to negotiate with the works council, etc. But mostly, if you ask employers, enterprises, they say, okay, it's a good thing that we have it. Less flexibility, however you may define it. Okay. Now, another quotation. Labor market flexibilization, and here you see what they are doing, what this definition is doing. This definition is putting the word flexibilization and the word deregulation the same meaning. Okay? This says flexibilization is deregulation. Okay. What we have seen before, I would say, because we have seen other approaches toward flexibilization, right? And this, they say it's seen as a requirement for economic and occupational growth. So to have less rules means less rules. Less rules helps with occupational growth. Put it that way, maybe, but not necessarily, because too many rules. Well, several answers. Too many rules are really, as a matter of fact, sometimes stop business, also stop work anywhere. So if you have to apply at 10 different public administrations for a permit, and this takes 3 years, it makes you inflexible. That's the way it is. And so if there are too many rules to be followed, you might be inflexible. But for us lawyers, it's not so difficult. I told my students always, if law is complicated, you should be happy, because that means jobs for lawyers. The more complicated it is, the more lawyers we need to deal with it. Okay. But flexibilization is, from my point of view, not really deregulation. It can be to a certain extent. But behind this idea is that regulation simply is bad. But regulation is not bad as such. Otherwise, people wouldn't need us as lawyers. The system would work without us. So towards more flexibility, many European countries increase the so-called atypical or non-standard forms of employment. So there was a movement saying, okay, we have to deregulate, flexibilize, or whatever. They said the atypical or non-standard form of employment, what does it mean? We are coming to another aspect of the topic. This other aspect is if people like me with a lifetime employment, if you have these people, and if you take it in a company, and the company has a lot of those people, what they do is they would take these people as the core workforce, okay? So they calculate and say, oh, this is the core. We always need this number of people, always. And then we can promise them lifetime. And then in addition, or we promise them open-ended contracts. And in addition, what we are doing is we also have part-time people, which makes it more flexible. And we also have people working only for a limited time, just for 2 years, for 3 years. And we may repeat it. So they work for 2 years, and we say, okay, another 2 years. Then another 2 years, and then another 2 years. And then we'll say, oh no, now we don't have enough orders. That's it. Makes flexible. Leaves, that's what it says, the regulation of existing employment unchanged. So you keep the people with the lifelong or open-ended contracts as they are. They enjoy it. And the others only have a chance to get into those jobs. The danger there is what? There's one country in Europe where you find it very much, which is Spain. In Spain you have this situation, and in Spain what you also have is youth unemployment. Because you have a lot of jobs, the older people, middle age, in these standard jobs, and the young people they cannot enter. You see? They cannot enter by permanent jobs. Because the permanent jobs are blocked and they're always in this second unsecure area. It's flexible, sure. But you may disappoint the young people. And actually in Europe you find out that that a lot of young Spanish people are working now in Germany because there are more jobs in Germany than in Spain. So, and then there's another wording, a European word, an artificial word. And this artificial word is called flexicurity. What is flexicurity? Well, it's a mix, a combination of flexibility and security. And this is an European Union strategy. This started in 2007 and is still working, but the main time when it really was discussed and so on was around between 2007 and 2011. And it was also discussed during the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. So, and this flexicurity is an integrated strategy for enhancing, at the same time, flexibility and security in the labor market. So, to do both. And it attempts to reconcile employers' need for a flexible workforce with the workers' need for security, confident that they will not face long periods of unemployment. Sounds like a wonderful idea, right? And and you see, at least when they did research on it and worked on it, in the first place, there were some polls saying that the employers, the enterprises, said, okay, it's a good idea. And they were a bit more in favor of flexicurity than the trade unions had been. But it was, let's try situation. And I will go more and focus more on flexicurity in order to show what it could mean and how it worked out in the different member states, okay? So some terms. We have now seen several terms. First term is flexibility. We have seen what flexibility could mean. Flexibilization is the process of doing it. Means, from some point of view, deregulation, not from all. The artificial word is flexicurity. And if you do it in the wrong way, or in a certain way, then, and this is another artificial word I found in literature, flexploitation. You know what it comes from, right? Exploitation and flexibility, it's flexploitation. And this also may happen because too flexible means can mean exploitation of people. So if you all the day you are a waiter bringing beer in the beer garden, and it's a rainy summer, and you wait all the rainy summer for orders, and they never call because it's raining, you are exploited in a way, and so this is not what it should be. So these are the terms. This gives you a certain idea of flexibility, flexibilization. Okay, if you have any ideas on what flexibility might mean, I appreciate your ideas.
Any doubts? Alguma pergunta, alguma dúvida? Então, a primeira parte ele fez. A primeira parte ele tentou definir o termo, deu as dificuldades da definição do termo, deu como ocorre isto na Europa e falou que não é a mesma coisa que desregulamentação. Tem que tomar muito cuidado com isso. E aí deu essas possibilidades. Aí falou da seguridade, eu não sei como é que fala aqui, mas é flexigurança. Essa daí, flexibilidade, flexsegurança, seja lá o que for. E disse da possibilidade do desvirtuamento disso tudo na flex exploração. E que daqui a pouco ele vai desenvolver um pouco mais essas questões.
Okay.
Nenhuma pergunta sobre a questão conceitual, sobre o tema?
Yeah. Yeah. What does this mean for? For unions. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, it's a very interesting question. Well, for a long time, I have to say that the trade unions in Germany, at least, were well, their membership were those in work, and their membership was not so much the people out of work. And so for a long time, the trade unions, if you criticize them, the trade unions focus more on those and they really more asked for good protection if you are in the job. To discuss, maybe you have to change it a bit for those holding a job, to help those who need a job, was a long process. And now I think we have a problem in Germany and in all Europe that the participation rate of the membership of trade unions is going down dramatically. And so the trade unions are thinking about the reasons for it. And they're also considering what to do better. And so they are now, in the last years, they started also to focus on those who don't have a job, who may get a job, and how to do this. So this is more focusing now. Okay? Other questions?
You can continue.
Okay. So, some other ideas. Flexibilization means, at the meaning mostly used, adjustment towards a changing world. There are several aspects we will follow in the next 3 days, the next 2.5 days. I make some points. One point I just wrote down here is there is a certain president, I don't mean yours in Brasilia, but I mean the guy further north in the White House in Washington. And he is fighting and doing commerce wars against everybody in a way. And he is now fighting Germany, he's fighting China, he's fighting, not Japan, but, well, anywhere. And for Germany, this would mean, well, he himself has several Mercedes in his ownership, but he wants to throw out Mercedes and the German car companies out of the country. And China is moving in a way, and Germany is a country which is dealing with a lot of other countries, and we are living from exports. And so we might face adjustment in a changing world, because if the Chinese cannot afford anymore Audi, and if the Americans don't buy Mercedes anymore, then we may have a problem. So it's one thing. So it's a changing world. How to deal with this? How to stay competitive? Or maybe here in Brazil, how to become competitive? Maybe it's here the other process down around. And also another aspect is digitalization. For sure, well, when I go back as a bit older guy, when I think back 20 years, this was a time without this. This was a time without this. There were big machines you could use, but you could not take with you in an airplane. And now we are in a period of doing everything with this thing here. And we are moving even further, digitalization. And digitalization means, for example, that you may work for Amazon wherever you are, and for them type some label they use for the products, and you do it with your computer at home, and you send it to a server on the Virgin Islands. And they pay you £1 for the entire work you did for half an hour or so. Do you have any rights? How can you get your money? Do they care about the working time? Is this employment? Are you employed by Amazon Virgin Islands? The same with Uber. And here the question is, should the labor law, should the social security law be adjusted towards the changing world? And how much is necessary? Should we reinvent our labor law and social security law? Or can we do it with, in principle, this labor law and social security law? So one argument there is keeping the old forms, make an economy inflexible, and it may lose competitiveness. It's possible, but it's not necessarily the case. The old forms may still make sense, and you have to bring up the questions how you could reform it, how you could maybe change it slightly, because international competitiveness is something important for the countries. We are living in such a world. And so in Europe, well, these countries like Brazil are big countries with a lot of people living here. I think it's now 280 million people around this, which is really something. But if you take Italy is a wonderful country, but it's 40 million. So these countries need to be internationally to survive. They cannot just stay with themselves. But the old forms, we also have to see, makes it difficult for women and for young people to get jobs. You have to see this, because well, it's a cliche that always women bring up the children, but take it that way, sorry for the ladies. But if a woman gives childbirth, and then she said, okay, I spent now 3 years out of the workforce to bring up the child. And then she starts back. She has given up her permanent old form job and tries to get in again, and usually, or very often, she starts again at the very beginning. And she has difficulty to get in. the same is the case for long-term unemployed. If you are long-term unemployed, it's difficult to get back into a job, especially when there are no real flexible ways to work, okay? So what is the EU doing? I'll go a bit for EU. What I'm planning is to tell you something about the European Union, how it works there, and also go a bit then to some countries, etc., and then especially to Germany, etc. So, what is now the EU doing? In the first place, I have to question you. How much do you know about the European Union? You know it is existing, right? You know how it works. It's different from Mercosur. You have Mercosur here, which does work somehow. Okay. Recently, I think they speeded it up again. But between Mercosur and the European Union, there is a huge difference. And this huge difference can also be shown by the problems the British have with the Brexit. Because this is, for us lawyers, the EU is a legal system with a court, with regulations directly applicable. So, for example, when I go from Germany to France, or next week I go to Belgium for work, and when I get ill in Belgium as a German, I refer to European law directly. There's a regulation which entitles me to go to a Belgian doctor. So it's a real system of, it's kind of an additional legal system, okay? And so Britain is in the system now for 40 years, and each year thousands of regulations, like a parliament, are established. And on Halloween, if Johnson, Prime Minister, is really running towards a hard Brexit, at Halloween, it's all over. Within 1 second, it's... And the rules do not apply anymore, on any of these rules. So it's important to know this, that it's like a country, like a state. It's very close to a state. So the EU is no longer just some countries having contracts like Mercosur, but it's like a federal state, close to a federal state already. And so there is an influence by the EU, the European Commission, Council, Parliament. You see, Council, Parliament, it's like a government. To do something. And so, flexicurity. The principles, the idea can be found in these 4 components here. What they ask for is flexible and reliable contractual arrangements. So reliable means you can count on them. Flexible means it has to be not too difficult to get out of them. Then they say the next thing is comprehensive lifelong learning strategies. What does this mean? Yeah, well, put it that way, there is a story. Yesterday I told you the story. There is the German city of Bochum. You may not know it. It's close to my place, and it's a city in the Ruhr area. And Ruhr means mining, It's coal in the old days. It also meant, because if you have coal, you can make steel, because you need coal for making steel. So steel industry. And coal, we just closed down the last mine in Germany, coal mine, it's done now. So all the coal miners had to learn something different. So some of them went to steel industry. Steel industry survived a bit longer. Now, if you are in the area of Bochum and Duisburg, you don't see any smoke anymore going out of some steel industry. It's over. Have to relearn. Then these people, there was Opel, which is used to be part of General Motors, a car company, had a factory in Bochum. This factory, so they learned how to put together cars. Couple of years, I think 10 years ago, Bochum closed down factory in Bochum, Opel. So a new company came, Siemens, and doing this here. So they learned to do this here, to fix this here. Then Siemens found out are not competitive. I once had a Siemens mobile, but you never have heard about a Siemens mobile now anymore. So, and Siemens sold them to a Korean company, BenQ, and the Korean company needed half a year to go bankrupt. And then Nokia came, you know the Nokia Finnish company. They established another company doing this and other phones. A couple of years later, they said, well, it's cheaper to produce in Romania. They're gone. You can survive only with lifelong learning strategies, but the problem is, in what direction? What should you learn? These people learned how to do this. This is new technology, but it's produced now in Romania and China, in other places, but not in Germany anymore. This is a Korean one. And the others are put together somewhere in Asia or wherever. So, but lifelong, anyway, you have to train people. Another aspect here, when you talk about the digitalization, I heard from the president of our employment agency, the Federal Employment Agency. He told us that in Germany, digitalization would mean the loss of 2.5 million jobs, because you don't need them anymore. But, he said, it will create 2.7 million new jobs. Okay, sounds great. Where's the problem? You may lose jobs with certain qualifications, certain people with certain skills, and you have to retrain them to another job. And not all of those who have lost their position are able to deal with the problems and the issues of the digitalized world. So it may produce, in the end, certain unemployment. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you see this aspect here. Effective labor market policy. So the idea is, if you make contractual arrangements more flexible, so maybe people lose jobs, then you should make labor market policies more effective. And labor market policies would mean, for example, to give people an idea of new jobs, to put them in training courses, and to also give, for example, maybe employers certain subsidies to employ long-term unemployed. So long-term unemployed, he might not be with a productivity of 100%, but just of 55 or so. And so the idea is to give him a subsidy to fill up the rest, and so he can get in and so on. So this would mean active labor market policies, and then also modern social security system. This means people could retire, they have unemployment benefits during the time when they look for a job in Portugal. They call it the Lisbon strategy because when the ministers, the presidents and the heads of state met in Lisbon, they developed a strategy, and since then they call it the Lisbon strategy. And this is part of the Lisbon strategy. Better jobs, modernize labor markets, promote good work, etc. All these wording by EU, if you read them, you say, wow, great world, wonderful world, perfect world. So you have to be a bit careful when you read it. But I did some work in the past, and I'll still do it for the European Commission, and therefore I'm used to this kind of wording. I know what's behind it. So it means we want to do this, and this is our, if you see a modern, adequate, and sustainable protection systems, that's great words, but the details get a bit more difficult. What we have in Europe when it comes to these approaches of flexicurity and whatever is, Europe, the EU, is, as I said, like a federal state. But these are countries with their own history. France, Germany, Italy, they have their own long history. They have their own long traditions. It's far more long traditions than you have here. You have the special traditions of, let us say, Minas Gerais in comparison to Rio or Sao Paulo. But this country is younger. And there you have really totally different approaches sometimes. And that's why they do not just say, well, we have to do this in this way, but we have to accept that several countries do it in their way. So a specific way in certain countries. So that's why it says, based on the common principles, each member state should develop its own flexicurity arrangements. And the interesting thing here is all this, we may read it here, because there are all great words here, how it is done in a way of introducing it. Well, the EU can set real regulations, real law. But what the EU also does is establishing soft law. You know what soft law means? Soft law is a law which without any sanctions, just soft. And when I started first to deal with European soft law, I said, well, soft law is not law. Be careful, be careful. Here, in these cases, they use this soft law approach by saying this should be, that's why I copied it here, this should be in this way, and then what the Commission, European Commission with the government, is usually doing is they initiate reports. And so they say, what does this country, what does this country, what does this country? And then they evaluate it. And they say this country might be better, this country might be not better. At least they put them together and show how they deal with it. And this has certain political influences because it impresses the countries. The countries are forced to do something. And that's here the power of the EU in this area, and that's what they did here. So I was in the 90s also writing such reports for the European Commission in other areas, and there I saw it. And it was highly political what I did. I didn't expect it before that it was highly political, because putting together informations for me was not political. But in the end I found out it was very political, because if you compare it, I'll give you, before I make a break, a small anecdote. In Greece, which has nothing to do with flexibility, but it shows how it works. In Greece, if you go to a doctor, you need, because the doctor pay very poor, you have to take with you an envelope. The envelope contains money. And the Greek word for envelope is fakalaki. So you need a fakalaki when you go to the doctor, which is against any idea of a healthcare system. And then the question was, should we mention the European Commission, and I worked for them, should we mention the fakalaki issue in the report? And I said, I think we should. And the guy from the Commission said, no. I said, Yves, we should do it. And then long discussion, and finally we did it. And half a year later, I had an appointment in Greece, and I talked with the government there, and they said, well, it was great that you mentioned the fakalaki, because then we can force our government to do something, because even the EU knows about it. So I want to show this has political meaning. Okay, so we have a break.
Gente, nós vamos dar um break aí de uns... Nós estamos agora, são 9h30, até 10 para as 10, tá? Aí ele retorna para a segunda parte. Gente, ó, só para voltar a lembrar, porque eu tenho algumas pessoas que não estiveram aqui. Quem faz parte do curso regular, o programa está no Moodle da disciplina. A semana que vem nós já iniciamos as nossas atividades com esse livro, que é o que a gente usa aqui. Então vocês vão ter que adquirir, porque esse a gente não tem o. Mas está lá, tudo explicadinho. E cada aula vocês vão ter que trazer uma pergunta no começo da aula, para a gente poder dar ensejo à segunda parte da aula, tá bom? Então tomem conta disso. And we will begin with our professor.
Okay. So let's restart. And I'm still giving you the background in a way, and we will get into the details, no problem. So in the first place, what I want to give you now is, in a way, not in a specific order, some cases. So cases about flexibilization. What can happen? What is flexibilization? What is flexibility? So, and you see, I just started with retirement age, which is maybe for you not in the center of it, but it's just, well, I associate it with some aspects and so on. So currently, in Germany, you want to retire, you have to work until age 66 plus 2 months. Men and women alike. It's different from here. Here, women can retire earlier. This would be against our constitution, and therefore men and women may retire at the same time. And with my students, I always joked about this topic by saying, with the males, I said, this is totally unjustified. We males our life expectancy is shorter than for women, and we have to work longer. That's not right. Okay, but it's a long discussion. But age 66 plus and 2 months is not easy for everybody. So I'm already beyond this age, but I love to work. I really love to. I have still the energy, because being a professor is a wonderful job. And there's no better job on earth from my point of view. But not all people want to work that long or can work that long. If you have done work in a factory for 40 years, you love the day when you don't have to go again into this noisy place where you have to work. Okay. And so the question is, and there you have the word flexible. What about flexible retirement? Can you say, well, I want to retire earlier? With what consequences? And maybe flexible also might mean, okay, I could work at least half time. Would that be possible? Which is also flexibility. So I will give my experience, but I only want to do it half time. Which is difficult in Germany because of inflexibility of labor law. And so you see, the flexibility is an issue there, because we have a rule there which says you can do it part-time, but this rule is so complicated because of additional earnings when you earn and you earn too much and so on. It's a horror of bureaucracy, this system, and so only very, very few people do it. I think I read a paper which said about 10 million would have the right to fall under this, but only 500 did it. 500 out of 10 million. So this is flexibility, okay? Is flexibilization a chance or danger? It depends. If you see digitalization, and you have the shared economy, this might be interesting for you to do something in addition. You might say, I don't need protection. You might say, it might be wrong, but you might say, you have platform economy, the thing I just told you about Amazon and writing those labels. This is very dangerous because you do something for a platform placed on a server, as I said, on the Virgin Islands, or you can take another island somewhere. You don't have any rights to follow there. You could theoretically, but it's practically impossible. So in the end, you end up without any rights. Uber is Uber employment? With Uber, if people work doing this, would they fall under it? Or what we talked about yesterday, if you do Uber, it's not just as in some countries, it's just that you have your car anyway, and you use it also for Uber in the evening to make some additional money. But here, obviously, that people buy to be Uber workers, and then it makes things very dangerous, because you may end up in bankruptcy if you get ill. You're doing this Uber, you have bought a car, and now you get ill, and you cannot drive a car anymore. Well, you also could lose your license because you left caipirinha just at one evening on a party too much, but then you lose your driver's license. Uber is gone. So it's dangerous. It's a risk. Also, the problem here is switching between employment and being self-employed. Where's the danger there? Some cases now, more and more, the old demarcation line between employment and self-employed is going away. So, give you an example with Uber. Uber tried to get to have business in Germany. They failed in the end. But during this time, I asked my students at an examination. I said, "Well, Uber, you all know Uber. Is this an employment contract or are they self-employed?" We had a long and very interesting discussion in the examination because it very much depends. But can you really work in the future with this? In any case, it depends. So a guy who is doing Uber just say, well, I'm bored in the afternoon after work, I love to drive around and I do Uber. He's not dependent. He only takes orders when he likes it. Then you might not put him as a worker. Another person who is always doing it and depending, I would say he is more likely to be an employee. But in practice, it's difficult now in this new system, which in background is flexibilization, in this new system to fix who is self-employed and who is employment. And the question then comes, should we really stay with making this difference? Should we redefine labor law? So, broaden it, okay? Or changing it. In what direction? It's a great discussion. We still in Germany, we do and I think in this country also, and we might discuss it also here, how to do it. Forget labor law at all, maybe, but I'm a labor lawyer, so I wouldn't say that. And your institute would not make any sense anymore. Yes. But then you have to see, do these people need the same kind of protection or not? And I tend towards similar kind of protection. But how to get this? So, flexibilization also as a chance, the last point, or danger, flexible working places. All you need in certain jobs is this. You can do it from everywhere. So yesterday they told me I should enjoy more my time, and it's too much working. But what I'm doing, I'm just traveling from Europe to here, this place with this here. And such an amount of papers. That's enough. In the old days, I couldn't do it. And so you can work, do your homework, or your work from any place. You also can do it from home. The question is, what about working hours? What about safety and health at work? How to control it? Okay, some other areas, which is very close to it. Coverage of Social Security, should it be extended? It's very much linked to what we said before. Yes. Do we have to give up the old system in Social Security law? Or should we extend this? But how to extend it? We are just, in my country, we are just discussing a new law on extending the Social Security system also to anybody who is gainfully employed, if it's self-employed or not, or so who is working and receiving money for work. But it's difficult to. It sounds simple, everybody, but in detail it's very, very complicated, because how to get them, how to find out where they work. Take the guy who is writing the labels for Amazon again. I love this case. Take this again. In the evening, you do some labels for Amazon, and Amazon will pay you €1 for any of the labels you have done. This is self-employment. Okay, let's take it as self-employment. Should this be covered by Social Security? In principle, yes, but how? How? Who should pay the employer's part? The guys in the Virgin Islands, they don't think about it, and they never would consider it. Okay? And you, how could we find out if you do it? What I'm doing in the evening with my computer, nobody knows, and it's nobody's business. So how to get it? Maybe by tax and so on. But you see, a lot of detailed issues there. The same is in labor law. How far should you go? Should you, in case of self-employed, tell them you have to stop working? I'm in part self-employed. Doing my work, I just also get some money in addition or so. Then I'm self-employed. If somebody would tell me, you have to stop working at 7, my wife is allowed to do this. That's a self-employed. but I have to follow rules which tell me at 7 it's over. So, well, I don't care. I'm myself. I can be reliable myself, and that's self-employed. So when you want to extend labor law, how far? So we have to deal with the flexibilization of the economy because we have these new kinds of work, and we have to deal with them. So this we already have covered. Another story. Still these stories. Another story is part-time versus full-time. An employee might be interested to be flexible. So in the ideal world of an employee, a worker, it would be great if you should ask the employer, simply require, say, okay, just currently I'm working 20 hours a week because I want to buy a new car and my house and my family, my son is studying, etc. I ask you to work full time now. And from next week on, I will work full time. That would be ideal for the worker. Or to say, I want to enjoy life more, work-life balance, that's what we call it. I want to work less, from 40 hours or 38 hours to 20 hours, starting next Monday. That would be the ideal world of the employee. The employer would say, when all of my people working part-time have the right to say full-time, I have too many workers. And if important people I need in my company say, forget it, I do work part-time, I'm in trouble. And so you have to find a balance there. And there we have European Union law here on this. Very interesting, this European Union law, how it came up. We have a way of making law by trade unions and employers associations. We call them social partners. And they made an agreement, so it's an agreement of both sides. They made an agreement, and the council, which is the kind of parliament like the Senate here, consisting of the governments of the member states, and the council and the European Parliament can ratify it, and so it becomes law, and so it becomes German law in the end. And so there they found certain rules under which the employees can do both, up and down. But it has to be an argument with the employer, and the employer can say no under certain conditions. So, but you see a flexibilization, yes, and how. So we also had the story of flexibilization. Last year I did some consulting work during the negotiations on new collective agreements in the area of metal industry and electric industry. And there it was about free choices of workers to have time off for care for children. So they could, under certain conditions, require to have some time off. And this was a fight between employer and trade unions, because employers said, well, we have to calculate, you have to be able to calculate, to plan, and but in the end there is some kind of this rule came into effect there. So this is also flexibility. And now let's come closer. So these are just some cases to show you how and what flexibility could mean. Let's now move over to one of the central issues of flexibilization. Germany and several other member states have strict dismissal protection, which means that it's difficult to get rid of people. I will spend some time later on today to explain to you the German system of dismissal protection so that you have an understanding of it. Well, but what happens if you have a strong dismissal protection? What happens? Does it really help? It will help the people who have a contract, okay? Will it help the others? What would you, if you think you take yourself not as a worker, but think in terms of an enterprise? You have an enterprise, and you have to make money for your own and to make the company successful. And you have 50 people with a strict dismissal protection. What would you do? You know you are working on a very volatile market, going up and down. What would you do? Would you, when you see there are good chances for additional orders for business, but you see, well, this business might be, well, a matter of the next 2 years. After this, nobody knows. What would you do? Hire another 20 with strong dismissal protection? You wouldn't do this, okay? So you would say, well, if I do this, it's dangerous. Because in 2 years, I have 70 people. And then, because then this market situation is over, but only work for 50. So what do? This means that there are 2 ways which happen. The one is those who have such kind of a job work overtime. They make more money because working overtime, getting more, there's surplus also on working overtime generally. So you make more money as a person in this situation, because this is easier, less risky than to hire new permanent people. Or what you do, you hire fixed-term people. You say it's a 2-year issue. I know definitely for the next 2 years. What happens later, I don't know. And so you hire people for a period of 2 years. At the end of these 2 years, if you hire the people now, we have now August 2019, and you hire them until August 2021, then you don't have to dismiss them, because simply at August 2021, time over. And if you find out, well, there's another market development, so another 2 years, you say, okay, you stay another 2 years, etc., etc. And sometimes it happens that they have then 10 of those contracts, fixed-term contracts. We had a European case of the European Court of Justice, where a person had 13 of those following contracts. And it was a shame for the institution involved. It was not a company, a private company, but it was the Justice Department. It was a person, a lady who had worked in the court, not as a judge, but secretary, and so even the public authorities do it to be flexible. Okay, this is one solution. I put it in marks because is it a solution? It divides the labor market, the job market, in two parts. Those who have a good job forever, and those who never get to the good job. Okay? Or temporary work as solution. And temporary work means there's a company, I don't know if you know the term, there's a company whose business is to give workers to other companies. And they are paid for this, okay? This is temporary work. So you simply hire people for temporary work. The champion on this was for some time, you never would believe it, BMW. You know BMW. The fancy cars. Yeah. And they had, I think, at some periods of time, 30% of the workforce were temporary. 30%. But I have to say, sometimes even it was an internal flexibility, because they gave, they had a company in the group of BMW, which gave temporary work to other companies within the group of BMW. Okay. What can you do there? The question is, could you now, what I said here, restricting the letter to, would it help to say, well, temporary work, we limit it very much. And jobs limited in time or fixed term, we also limit this. Would it help? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because in the end, this then might end in informal labor. Because if you do it too strict, you have an evasion always. So difficult. What is the reason for youth unemployment? They might be the most flexible if you're young. There are closed labor markets. Why? Well, see above. You know? So you see already that the issue of flexibility is a complicated one. And to give you more understanding on it, I want to give you some insights into the German labor law system so that you understand it better. Yeah. Sure. Everything clear? Seems to be, hopefully. Okay. So in Germany, the labor law we deal with is made of two elements. One is individual labor law, and individual labor law means the labor contract and certain legal rules and regulations concerning this, health and safety, protection in case of motherhood, vacation, working hours, unfair dismissal. So all this is ruled by law. And what you also should know here is that at least when it comes to health and safety, and protection in case of motherhood, well, in a way, except unfair dismissal, everything, is influenced very much by European Union law. So this is not an issue just of Germany, but the health and safety is mostly European law. And on motherhood, there are some directives on motherhood, so that's similar as well. And there are even some on vacation, especially some on working hours. So you have more or less the same working hours all over Europe. And with unfair dismissal, this is an aspect where the countries, the member states, didn't find a common solution. So when I'm just talking about European Union law and its influence on labor law, why do we do this? Why do we try to harmonize, to make it similar among the member states? What is the reason for this? Well, the reason for this is if you have put it that way, which reminds me of some discussions in the United States, and I think now these days here as well. If you read the Treaty of Rome is the constitution, in a way, of the European Union. And if you read in the Treaty of Rome a certain article about harmonization of laws, there is a sentence saying by creating a single market and by replacing all the obstacles, or removing all the obstacles for free movement, etc., there will be economic progress, and as an automatic consequence, social progress will follow. That was what it said. So later on, some 30 years later, Reaganomics told the same. It said, well, speed up the economy, and this will be good for social progress. And Donald Trump now does the same as well. Bolsonaro, I cannot comment, I don't know the details, but I fear it's the same approach. And in Europe, European Union found out around, well, pretty soon that is wrong. And there was a case, and this is maybe to understand it better, there's also something with flexibilization and international competition within the EU. There was a case where a company had 2,000 workers. Of the 2,000 workers, they had 500 in Germany, 500 in Belgium, 500 in the Netherlands, and 500 in France. So, and they found out we have 500 too many, so in excess of 500. What did the company do? They asked their lawyers and said, please find out in which country is the most easiest way to get rid of 500 people, just at once. And these lawyers did their work pretty good and said, Belgium. Because there you have to pay something and then you get rid of them. But it's the best way to do it in Belgium. And so they closed down the Belgian factory. And they kept the German, etc., etc. And so they found out, okay, it seems not to work, the progress. We have to have some minimum standards in social aspects as well. And so this was the birth day, in a way, of European social policy. And so what we are now doing is there are limits on working hours set by European Union law, which are not regulations directly effective, but directives which the member states have to put into national law. The same with vacation, the same with health and safety. So no country can say, okay, we don't care about health and safety, and then we are more competitive. And so this is what it is here. So this is an issue of flexibilization is good, but not unfair competition. There would be unfair competition within the single market, and they say a single market would mean fair competition we could do. We could produce cheaper in one country. That's why the Nokia went to Romania, but they are the same rules on working hours. The other thing is collective labor law. And collective labor law, which is not so important for our topic of flexibilization, but we have to mention it. It's later on important when we talk about the Works Council. But here we have collective agreements. I will talk about collective agreements later. And also the Works Constitution Act, which is very peculiar. Germany is the only country in the world with this specific kind of Works Council. Because this Works Council does not only mean that you the people, the workers, may convene and talk with the employer, but they have real rights. It's the German word for it is Works Constitution Act, as I wrote down here. So it's a constitution of the factory. Really constitution with rules. You can do this, I can do this. If I do this, you have to act, etc., etc. And I will explain it a bit later. And this is a collective labor law we have there. Here we have special protection in all these cases, we need this also later. So I have to be a bit specific in this area. And the key for labor law is the same here. The key for labor law is he a worker or employee or not? Okay. And in your course, I think when you teach labor law, the first thing is who is a worker, who is an employee, right? And if somebody is not an employee is out, if an employee is in. And who is a worker in my country? Think about Uber at this year. And then you get an idea. A person who is personally dependent from the employer. In case of Uber, you may say yes. Okay? Bound to orders regarding time of work. If you have a Uber driver who says, well, I'll do it when I want, and when I see here on my screen car is needed, I say, no, I'm just drinking coffee. Then he might not be a worker. The place of work, where to work in a company, the type and details of work, and integrate it into the organization. This is how we deal with it, and it's difficult in cases because you have always exceptions. Bound to orders also to type and details of work. If you take this, I never have been an employee. All of us as professors, we don't obey orders. It's a freedom of science. I do what I want. And place of work, well, I also can work at home. And time of work, well, my daughter is studying mathematics, and the mathematician professors, they work at time unbelievable. So I once was invited by a mathematics professor for lunch at midnight because he got up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so this is Professor. And away from these jokes, if you see the new kinds of work, what about this? Time of work? They don't care when you do it. They care that you do it. Place of work? You need this here. Nothing more. And where you do it? If I say I'm in South America, so okay, if the data lines are good enough to our place, no problem. You can be at the South Pole if you want. It's a bit cold there, but you can do it. And type and details depends. So it's difficult, maybe no longer possible to use these principles. Maybe. So here, these are specific things which I clip in a way. There are questions what you have to ask before. You might read it. I put it here into this paper because then you get an idea of German labor law. You can read it if you want. So the German employer may not discriminate on the grounds of race, sex, sexual orientation, age, disability. This is again important, maybe also for us. This is European Union law. It's not German law, but European Union law. And here in case of hiring, but also in the case of working conditions. And the worker may claim punitive damages or equal treatment. So this I also should not take too much. Health and safety at work. Pregnancy, certain rules. Childbirth also, but here you see already some flexibility when it comes to years out. So, for example, in case of childbirth, 3 years after childbirth, mother or father may ask for time off with guarantee to be rehired. And they now really divide it. And some usually employers even accept, they stay on the job and they take this. So, for example, I had to do with another lawyer at an institution, and he said, well, for the next 4 weeks, I'm not available. I take my father's time. And so he is sharing with his wife. Always one of them is staying at home and the other is working. And so this is very flexible. And you can ask it, but you have to deal with your with the company, or in this case it was an administration. And they have to agree, but you can be flexible, work-life balance, and you can care for your family. So, flexibility here in the German system. Maximum of working hours. Limit of flexibility. Generally 40 hours per week. Usually the Germans work 38.5 hours a week. You should not work more than 8 hours per day. European Union law, that's all over Europe. The daily working hours may be extended by 2 additional hours. So they can ask you to work instead of 40 hours, of 8 hours, 10 hours per day. But not more. Flexibility is closed at this point because, I say, of health reasons, not to exploit people too much. And working hours also per week shall not exceed 48 hours. So what I said before concerning the flexibility, let's work our people over time, is limited to 2 hours per day. So they cannot do more. There are certain provisions now that you can organize a factory work around the hour, 24 hours. But you have to follow these rules here. It's possible. Minimum confinement of vacation, 18 days. So this is not important for flexibility we here have. So let me see. Your salary is also nothing to do. Okay, illness. This is again interesting. Also, when it comes to flexibility, or comes to use, it's a story of how to deal with these requirements. So companies have to hire a certain number of disabled persons, which is a good idea as such. Okay? If the company does not fulfill this, they have to pay a certain amount to a fund which finances promotional measures for the disabled. Sounds great, right? But what happens? In addition, special protection in case of dismissal. You cannot dismiss a disabled person without prior admission by a special body, so it's difficult to fire them. Can you imagine what happens in practice? Not fraud, not fraud. Companies do calculation. And they say, well, pay a certain amount. I think it's 200 to 400 euro a month if you don't hire. And they say, okay, what is cheaper for us? To hire a disabled person or to pay 300? And so they say, okay, all these problems here, we pay the 300. Flexible. Okay, very flexible. And the discussion then was, okay, let's increase the amount from 300 to 500 to 800 to 1,000. That might help. That might help. But there's opposition from several sides, so they're still there at this point. This is another issue of flexibility or not flexibility. I don't know how it is here. If a company sells a plant, what is with the works contracts?
Here?
Yeah.
I don't remember what happens here. I don't know.
If a company, let us say, a company has, well, the famous cases are, for example, a very clear case. A company has its own cafeteria, run by their own people. Because in the industry, the salary is pretty high, but in the industry of cafeterias, the food industry, it's low. So the best way is to sell the kitchen, to outsource the kitchen, the cafeteria, to a company somewhere in the area of food industry, make things cheaper. What is with the works contracts, the employment contracts?
Here in Brazil, they maintain.
They maintain.
Yes.
Okay. This is the same European law, but this is a limit to flexibilization. Because if you sell a company, you cannot get rid of the contracts. I know in China, if you do the same, they have to look for another job. So, but we are now.
But the former employer is liable for this conflicts.
Yeah. The former and the new one, both.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Well, that's the same.
It's the same.
It's the same. Okay, let's now go into more detail to termination and end of labor contract, because this is very important to our issue of flexibilization. What you can see is there has to be the possibility of ending a labor contract, okay? Any contract you have should be able to end any contract. That's the standard of the law. So here the employee might have another job and therefore needs to end this contract, the employee, the worker. Should this be made easy or not? Yes, I think. But the employer is interested not, this is, if you have an important guy who is doing an important job, and he says, well, tomorrow I'm gone. I said, huh? And then I have to stop my production because you are the only one with the certificate to do this kind of job. Mm-hmm. So there you have to follow a certain period of time in order to make this feasible. An employee, he does not have to tell about any reason. He can do it freely. He simply says, I go. Okay? Mm-hmm. The only thing is he might later on need a reason if it's unemployment insurance. They may ask for it, but that's we cover later. There are only necessary periods of notification. So, now in case the employer wants to dismiss somebody, should this be easy? If you think about flexibility, from a certain perspective, you would say yes. Okay? But here, you have to see the worker loses his job. And job usually means you live on this. That's your existence. That you feed your kids, you pay your house, etc., etc. So the best for the worker would be to have a job where he is totally protected against dismissal, like professors. I knew I could lose my job only if I would go to jail for more than 2.5 years. And that's already something you have to do. And so I never thought about this kind of crime. So I'm totally protected there. But now you have to find a way to make dismissal possible. You have to live with this. Because make companies very inflexible. So let's take a company with 2,000 people, and this company has 2,000 people totally protected against dismissal. They have not enough orders. If they cannot fire some of them, they would run into bankruptcy in the end because they have to pay. And at the end of the day, also the other jobs would have been lost. Because if you have 2,000, and for this 2,000 you only need 1,000 because of changes, you have to pay 2,000 for a long time. If you can limit it to 1,000, the company can survive. These 1,000 jobs are secure. And if you have to go all the way with 2,000, it's clear that in the end there will be bankruptcy, because you cannot give them any work to do, but you have to pay them. So companies have to find a way to be flexible and to get rid of those people, to dismiss them. This is important. And there might be several reasons. One is what I said is the business reason, so not enough orders. The other might be the worker might be unable to do the job, so ill or something. And the worker has done something wrong, so you see, in the end, there is a need for dismissal. But where are the limits? Hire and fire? That would be the radical alternative. Makes things easy. Very, very flexible. But what are the costs of this kind of flexibility? Yeah, maybe unemployment. Maybe the worker cannot plan. So it's risky for them. And so the question is, how far do you protect them? In a country where you know there will be always jobs, it's easier than in a country where you don't know it. It's risky. So how is it dealt with now in Germany? Within the first half year, you can fire people without strong limits. You simply can say, well, sorry with you, it doesn't make sense. So you try the person, and if you have tried the person and say, well, it's not what I thought about when I hired you, then you can let the person go. And the person has only the right to say something against it if the employer says, well, I fire you because you are a lady. I fire you because you are black. Discrimination. Or some other of those reasons. And after half a year, special protection against dismissal. But now we are again with the flexibility. I don't have it here expressively on the slide. After half a year, you have a special protection I will describe now. But this applies only to people which work in bigger companies. Why? Think about our word we are talking about. We're talking about flexibility. And why should we exclude a company with less than 10 workers? Why? Has this something to do with flexibility? Well, generally, to be excluded from this makes you more flexible. But the idea behind it is that small companies need to be more flexible when firing people. Because if it's small and you have 10 people with long-term contracts, this might ruin a small company. That's the idea behind it. And so this period, this number of 10 or more or less or so, is also a kind of mechanism for flexibilization. If you reduce it to 5, you make the system less flexible. If you increase them to 15, you make it more flexible. So this was our lawmakers did also. To fire somebody is possible only in certain cases. And these cases are, in the first place, personal reasons. There are three reasoning. Personal cases, so illness, inability to perform the job. It should not be only illness, but also some other inabilities. So, for example, if you lose your driver's license as a bus driver, it's personal reason. I did it, even if it's just because caipirinha. The other thing is behavioral reasons. And behavioral reasons means you express bad behavior. Bad behavior does not mean you're unpolite. That's not enough. But it needs to be some serious thing. So, taking away something, do not obey orders, destroy goods of the company, or whatever. These might be those. And in the end, finally, there are enterprise reasons. And enterprise reasons mean in a way, put it very short. Sorry, the enterprise doesn't need you anymore. That's enterprise reason. So this is especially what we are now seeing on flexibility. How is this now done? It sounds as if it's possible without problems. But if you go into details here, details in the law and details in the cases decided by the courts, you see it far, far more complicated and also restricted. So, go into the detail there. If the employer wants to fire somebody, he has to prove the reason. Okay. And the employee may go to court against dismissal, and if he finally wins the case, he will get the money for all the time. And generally, in all these cases, the decisive question, according to law, is whether the termination is socially justified. Socially justified. And this means certain requirements for any of those reasons. And so you see, take personal reasons. For example, take the guy who lost his driver's license because of drinking alcohol and running into control in examination. He lost it. Will he be fired for personal reasons? It depends. It depends. If, for example, they say, okay, they take it away, the driver's license, for 3 months, and then he will receive the driver's license again. Then the court, if you go to court, would say, okay, it's only 3 months. During these 3 months, you, the company, the bus drivers, the bus company, you can give him some work in the back, in the garage or whatever, where he doesn't need a driver's license. And so what you do always is to look into the future. Okay? You say, will he be unable to do it in the future? Or you have a person, for example, have been ill and Well, was out of the company of work 1/3 of the year. Always a week there, a week there, a week there, 2 weeks there, 4 weeks there, etc. So altogether 3 months to sum up. And so the employer would say, I want to get you out because it's impossible to do work with you because I have to hire an additional person to fill your job because you are not reliable. Okay? Can this guy win the case? Yes. He has only to show up, as something from a doctor which says, well, we have found the reason for all this illness. And now he gets this surgery and this pill, and then it's done. Then he will stay. Because you only look into the future. You say, will he be able or unable to do the job in the future? Okay? And so this already means that there is, you see, for these personal reasons, a very strict protection. You have to look for maybe another job. You have to say, well, if he has this kind of illness, could you, employer, employ him in your company at another place? Or let's take the bus driver, he has had an accident and lost his leg. Well, it's not impossible anymore to drive. Yeah, but then he cannot fire him if in his company as a job he can fill after he has lost his leg. So, pretty strong. Here, it has to be sure that in the future there will be no change in the situation to the better. So, the person has totally recovered. Is a dismissal still justified? No, it isn't. Nor possible to have this person working in another job, so the employer has to see if he finds another job in his company which nevertheless might fit. Only if all these requirements are met, the dismissal is valid. Otherwise, it's invalid. The same applies in general to the other reasons. What about behavioral reasons? Well, we have a guy, again I refer to the guy in Washington in the White House. He loves to say, you are fired. And somebody who does not follow his ideas, fired. Behavioral reasons? Well, in Germany, it would not be possible. The behavior has to make him unable for the job. So, for example, a worker is always late. If they have flexible working hours, it doesn't matter. Or if he behaving bad, if he molesting other people, also cases of sexual harassment. Maybe there are reasons, but if you have a job for this guy who has done it, where he doesn't have any contact with other people, you have to keep him. And so this is not a sanction for bad behavior, firing. The only reason for firing, or the only justification for firing, is that this person in the future, again, is unable to do the job. Okay? So if you see we can have him on another way there, it's fine. And what you also always have to do is to warn him before. So you have a case where a person came late, but he had been in an office at a certain time because the customers are there. And he does it several times. And you don't do anything as you are the employer. You don't do anything. And then after, when he has it the 10th time, you say, well, you're fired. I'm tired of you coming late. The employer will lose the case. Why? He didn't warn him. Because he should have tell him and tell him the consequences. If he simply says, put it that way, you have the employer standing there when his workers are coming in. And he has a clock there. And he waits 10 minutes after the hour. And then our guy comes, but nothing more than, and he does it 10 times. It's not a reason. Because it only shows I don't like it. Okay? But what he has to show is, if you do it again, you're fired. So he has to tell them, this is what you're doing wrong, you come too late, and if you do it in the future, then you're fired. If it's not done, no chance. So when you work as in labor law and you get a file on this kind of dismissal, you always look where's the warning. And if there's no warning, case is lost.
You
Okay.
have to write the reasons in a paper, something like that?
You don't have to, but you have to prove it somehow. Okay. So the practice is that you put it in his personal files. You write something and put it in his personal files. No employer would just do it by saying, except he has some other people hearing it. So the practice is he writes it into the personal files.
And when you write the person also, you have to justify with write documents that you are firing the person.
Yeah.
You have to justify.
In the first place, if you warn him, you have to do it in writing. You are suggested to do it in writing. And if you fire him, you have to do it in writing as well. And so that is really clear. And if you see this person says, well, I never will do this again, and it can prove it right, he keeps the job. So, and now we are at the center. Enterprise reasons. The enterprise reasons, the employer is generally free to decide on his enterprise. So we have a rule, a principle, which says when it comes to reason of his enterprise, this have to be accepted. So, for example, if an employer says, let us say an employer is producing toys for children, which are small tanks and small fighter planes. And now he's becoming a pacifist. This guy, he's becoming a pacifist. He said, well, to sell these tanks and these machine guns and all this kind of stuff for young people, for kids, that's terrible. I stopped this kind of production. And in the future, I will do some souvenirs. Use some souvenirs, some Eiffel Tower, whatever. And because his production of these tanks was so popular that he really made a lot of money with it. And now with the Eiffel Tower, small Eiffel Tower, etc., there are a lot of competitors, and so he doesn't make the money anymore. And so he knows if I move my production from tanks to souvenirs, I will not be able to have my workforce the same size because less productivity. The decision might be his very personal one. I became pacifist. But it's his enterprise decision. And so you can, at the court, if he then fires half the workforce he has, the court could not say it was crazy to go from very efficient tank and machine gun production to this kind of souvenirs. This was strange. He could not say, because this was his decision. Only in cases where you really couldn't understand, there are some borderline cases. So this means, coming back to flexibility, the employer is flexible to change his production and to fire people. We come later to some exceptions. So he's generally free to close down the plant or to cut the workforce in half. But he has to show that his enterprise reason is an urgent one. So I have to make the new decision. Or I see there are orders, no orders anymore. And I don't see any orders in the future. And so before I go bankrupt, I have to cut back my workforce. These are what he can do. So I've written here reasons maybe less. Should I go back? Or? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Because they can make questions.
Okay. 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 So reason may be less orders, and therefore work for the company or the introduction of new technology, which may result in less jobs. So digitalization. A guy is digitalizing his company. I said, well, half of you I don't need anymore. I have enough of this equipment. And this makes the job you have done before. But now, the thing is, he has to show that these are urgent reasons, enterprise reasons. And that as a consequence of his decision of changing the company, that following this decision, it is urgent to do this kind of result, this kind of sanction, that's not sanction, this kind of firing people. Okay, she has to prove this direction. And then, in the first place, he has to look if there are other jobs available in his company. So, for example, if he closes down one department of his company, he has to look if there are other open jobs in his company. And if there are other open jobs available for this person with his qualification, etc., then he has to put this person there, offer at least the job there.
There is a department of the government who controls this, to whom he has to demonstrate it.
Okay. Good, thank you. What I say is always here, it's a matter you have to, after any dismissal, when it's expressed, the employee, the worker, can go to court, to the labor court. Okay. And he has to do it within 3 weeks and file a case. if he does not do it within the 3 weeks, it's deemed to be good reason. So if he misses this, it's over. And so all this here, what I explained, you have to prove to the court. Okay, just to the court. And that's why also, when we talked about this Friedrichsfeld, the issue, the upper level there, this is an issue that the court, the labor court, is not really in a position to evaluate business decisions.
Yes.
There are some. I have a PhD candidate who is trying to criticize and question mark this here, but generally, well, also his conclusion is, to a certain extent, there has to be this here, and the the court cannot really decide on these business reasons, not because the lawyers and judges are not good enough for this, but this is not their business. That's the idea. Okay, but you see, there is it's you may dispute it, and that's why this person is
you're just showing the
no, but why this person is writing his PhD thesis just on this question, and he in a way also says, well, why shouldn't they decide on this reason? Why shouldn't they decide on the issue of the enterprise there? But this has some follow-ups, and that's why he, in the end, is a bit reluctant. But you should, I think you might go more in the direction of at least in part controlling it. Okay. So, now let us take the situation. You have found that a person, that the company has to take a case, and in this case we are talking about a certain department of a company, and this department of the company, let's say, has 100 people working there, and of these 100 people, you know, and the employer says, I have to fire 1/3. Let us say 35 to make 1/3 easier. So through 35 I have to fire. Out of 100. Which one? Well, he might say there are some guys which are lazy. I have them on my payroll already for 30 years. They are not very productive. They always look at the hour when it's over. When work is over. And if you ask them for new ideas, the last new idea they had 30 years ago, and I need more dynamic young people. And then I have some people in their mid-50s, and they have a family. They are more concerned with their family than with the job. So it's terrible. Always they're talking about their children, etc. And they are eager to have the job because they need it to feed the family. I want to have a real young, dynamic workforce. Is it possible? No, it's not possible. It's not possible. And here, exactly at this point, is the major problem of this kind of enterprise reason dismissal. At this very point. And there we are really at the flexibility issue. Here, because whom could you fire or not? And you might say that those people who need the job more has a family, or that people who are older, they have more difficulties to find again a job, etc. So not the young, fancy, the young dynamic workforce. You have to take them first. So for a long time, the courts, Federal Labor Court, didn't make things very easy. They allowed a number of different reasons. There was no exact saying in the law. And so they said, well, you have, they called it social selection. You have to make the right social selection. And this social selection was an extremely risky business, because the employer had to present to the court a list of workers he would like to fire, and he would have at each of the worker, when you have 100, it's really paperwork, he would have to list up what are the reasons why he should pick him and not him, etc., etc. Very often the court found, this guy has 5 children but is young, and this guy has 4 children and is a bit older but was hired earlier. Okay, you see this case? And so they said, he said, I fire the older one. And the court said, no, the younger one, because, and so on. You see? Because the question was, what was more important, to be hired, or the number of children, or the age? And so you could never, if you go into the position of the employer, you could never be sure if you would win the case.
Okay.
Because you always said, well, and the attorney said, well, we cannot guarantee anything, and you may lose the case because of this, because you may just try to do the best, you do it perfect, but you couldn't know how the judge would evaluate it. This made enterprise reasons very risky business. And so it made the system here at this point inflexible. And the result for the enterprises was to not to wait for a court decision, but just say, okay, 50,000 euro and we are done, which makes it more expensive. So this was a conflict here, all right? Okay.
So yeah. You don't have so many kinds, so many cases of this kind of dismissal because of this kind of difficulties.
At a certain time in the past, when it was, well, we have now, I come to some changes later, we have now a system where there are only certain fixed reasons. So the judges are bound. So you say this is more important than this, and so on. So you say it's a matter of age, it's a matter of number of children, it's a matter of...
Okay, but because what are you saying, the enterprise avoids this kind of dismissal or not? Or it's usual?
What the enterprise did at that time, when it was very, very difficult, what they did was they tried to buy themselves out. So they went to the people and said, well, how much do you want if you go? And so they paid a certain amount to get rid of them, and said, and please then sign that you won't go to court because of this. This was the situation at that time, which was difficult for the companies to deal with. Yeah, that's what I said. Also because the employer is not sure about the results, this may lead to a situation where he's reluctant to hire new people, since he fears in the end he would have difficulty to get rid of them again, or it would be expensive. Okay, so either he will lose the case, or he says in the first place, okay, would 20,000 euro enough if you go voluntarily? This would be one result, but both would mean, because this is money, would mean for him not to hire people on a permanent basis. Because in both cases, it is disadvantageous for him to hire those people. And so he would avoid to do this. So for him, this kind of unflexibility or flexibility or whatever would be also to the disadvantage of people working, because the number of permanent jobs would become less and less and less. And he would try to do it by fixed term contracts. He would try to do it by temporary work. So this here is not so important for our topic anymore, because it is on dismissal in cases of important reasons. Important reasons means you have to fire the people immediately. Because the other, what I told is that if you dismiss people, it may also take some time. So give you an example, my sister, she was married to a person who, with his brother, owned a chain of photo shops, so selling cameras and this kind of thing. And due to these kind of cameras, they could make a photo of all of you. People don't need cameras anymore, and you do not have to put in a camera, such kind of film. So these shops are going out of business. And so they decide to close down the chain. And it took more than 1.5 years to do it. Especially because of this year, because they had a number of people who had worked for them for 20, 30 years. And the longer you work, the longer is the period, the notification period. And so some of them had a contract where if you were to fire them, I think it was the case, you had to do it in that case in the first month of a year, notification that the contract will end of the year. So January this year and this year of end of this year. And so a long period. And this makes things, again, more difficult and more inflexible, or whatever you want. And here, in case of important reasons, then you have to prove that it has to be immediately. And these have really to be a severe reasons. So in class, I always tell the people a case when a worker goes to his employer and tells him, "You are a bad guy. I will kill you and your family, definitely." And then he takes out a knife and says, "Here, with this here." It's behavioral reasons. And if you think about warning and telling me, "Don't do it again," doesn't work. So there you should have the chance to say, "Get out of here." This is important reason. An important reason also may be, but less likely in case of enterprise reasons. But in this case I just mentioned, it was really important because they had to get rid of the people. but it was not important enough to do it immediately. So I think I should stop here, because otherwise it's 1 minute before. I should stop here and do the other things tomorrow.
A gente vai proceder da seguinte maneira, porque até para ser mais produtivo, porque a gente depois de um professor também vai se cansar muito, se cansa bastante, né? E também as pessoas, o nível de atenção que é exigido é muito grande. Então, vamos fazer tudo entre 8h30 e 11h30, tá? Então, amanhã começamos às 8h30, vamos até às 11h30. Só que agora, como são 11h30, se vocês quiserem fazer alguma pergunta, é possível também, porque aí a gente quebra um pouco essa dinâmica. E eu continuo a lembrar os alunos, os regulares inscritos, que a semana que vem nós já teremos atividades. Então, entrem no Moodle, verifiquem lá as regras e a gente já tem atividade em que precisa desse livro, inclusive com as perguntas a serem feitas, e pode trazer prejuízos a vocês. E no final da aula eu passo aqui a chamada também, vou passar a chamada daqui a pouco. E, então a gente faz isso. Aí se vocês quiserem fazer alguma pergunta, enfim, fiquem à vontade, porque aí amanhã ele começa desse ponto. Ele precisava de falar sobre o sistema de dispensa, porque o sistema de dispensa é talvez a coisa mais sensível quando a gente está tocando a questão da flexibilização. Então, ele deu uma geral sobre o sistema para poder depois colocar isso na perspectiva geral da flexibilização. Alguém tem alguma pergunta? Yeah. She sort of was moving to the new system of protection, but she needs to know more about this relation between the dismissal and the social security protection. You can see something about that?
Okay, sure. If a person is dismissed, this person will, for a certain time, remain in the health insurance system. If this person files unemployment, during this time, the person will get unemployment benefits, except the person itself has made the reason. So they qualify and say if the person has, for example, stolen something, then the employment agency which pays these benefits will stop this payment for some time, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and so also if you terminate your contract without good reasons, then you also might do the same, because it's an insurance and you cause the insurance case yourself. But nevertheless, the coverage by health insurance will remain. So you only will have to live with less. Tomorrow I will also cover parts of this there. And so it will be unemployment benefits. Your period of unemployment will also count for pensions. So it's a period for pensions. And so the risk of losing everything is limited. This, in a way, is, you may call it, I started with flexicurity, roughly. This is kind of flexicurity. So you are out, but you do not fall in a black hole. You still have certain, And the unemployment benefit is about 60% of last net, 50% of last net income. So it's not too much, but you can at least live on. But this is not the same in all European countries. In Italy, for some time, it was said. I asked some, that's long ago. Now it's increased. But one time I asked an Italian friend about the unemployment benefits in Italy, and he said, "Well, for an espresso every day, it's enough."
Ok. Mais alguma pergunta? Desculpa. Students know about the unions and the paper of the role of the unions in this case of dismissal. They are active or not?
Okay. Well, in this case, the case of dismissal, I will come to this later. But the trade unions do not play any role. But who plays a role is the Works Council, and the Works Council is elected by the workers, and very often there is on a list of the trade unions. So there's certain involvement of trade unions, and here it is a case that in any of those cases, when you fire somebody as an employer, and there is a works council in your plant, in your factory, then you have to notify them. You have to tell them that you plan to, and then you have to give them a time to react, the works council. And if you don't, the termination, the dismissal is void. So, give an example. During my clerkship long ago, I got several of those cases, long cases with a lot of paper written and so on. What I always did in the first case, I didn't read the papers. I looked, has this company a works council? Answer, yes. Have they notified the works council? No notification of the file. Case done. Okay, so there's a certain influence.
A importância dos conselhos, né? Mais do que dos sindicatos. Mais alguma pergunta? A gente vai ter muita pergunta para fazer também, porque a gente vai ter muito tempo juntos aqui, então...
I have one little question.
Yeah.
Here in Brazil, if the company have or do not have a reason to the dismissal, interferes not in its validity, but in this, if you pay or don't pay a fine for this dismissal. But the reasons that allow not to pay a fine for the dismissal are strictly defined by the law.
So
is it the case in Germany, or is an open?
So you mean there are rules to avoid dismissal?
No, the dismissal is generally free.
Okay.
You can dismiss an employee by any reason.
Okay.
But if it's not a reason recognized by law, you have to pay a fine to the employee. If it's a reason like a bad behavior, you can dismiss the employee without any payment. But here in Brazil, we have a specification of these reasons.
No, this in Germany is not the case, because we have this kind of strict rules. We have these reasons there, and this reason mean dismissal, yes or no, for these reasons. And so we don't have a list, because we say generally you cannot fire somebody except. That's a principle. And so payments are only in certain cases, but which are not relevant here. So these payments are simply to avoid a court case.
Okay, but what I want to know is when you say bad behavior allow dismissal. German law says what means bad behavior or important reasons, or it is an open statement that the courts decide what does it mean?
Yeah, well, okay. The law says only doesn't talk about bad behavior, but for behavior reasons or personal reasons. Just this. Okay. And this is filled up by the courts.
Okay.
And so, for example, when it comes to illness, and these illness people are not there or so, the courts have said if it's more than 1/4 of a year, it might be a reason. So, or the question also is behavioral reasons always has something to do with your own will or not? Or is personal reasons something to do with your own will or not? Have you be guilty or not? No. It's simply that it happens. If you are ill, you are fired. You can be fired. So, but there's a lot of cases, very lot of cases, and you have to learn all these cases to understand dismissal law in Germany.
Então vamos terminar por hoje. Aí amanhã às 8h30, né, esses 3 dias serão assim. Na semana que vem a gente começa no horário normal de 8 até meio-dia. Esse de 8h30 até as 11h30 com as perguntas franqueadas depois é para a gente poder potencializar, porque senão acho que a gente fica muito cansado também, né, e o professor. Tá bom, então?
Okay.
Let's go. Now, let's go to lunch.
Okay.
O Flávio, isso aqui deixa aqui mesmo?
Acho que sim, acho que é o Eduardo que recolhe.
Obrigado a vocês, tá bom? Tchau.